Hello, and this talk is on the Western way of war. The playlist in my channel shows the Western way of war and the history of it, and this talk is to go with that playlist. What is the Western way of war? Well, as you can read in Clausewitz on war and in Tom Clancy's Into the Storm, which profiles history of General Fred Franks, who helped devise Desert Storm, and that his plan later on became General Schwarzkopf's plan through the encirclement of Kuwait and the destruction of the Iraqi Republican Guard. It's a shame he didn't put into his plan to go on to Baghdad in 1991. What is the Western way of war? Well, the main difference between the Eastern way of war is distance. Originally, the Eastern way of war was to keep a distance between your opponent and yourself, and to use missiles, for instance. Now, the first Western modern soldier would be, as you can see from the clips, the hoplite. Now, the hoplite was an armoured soldier with a shield and pike, and he would come to a predetermined place, and there would be a shield wall formed and a clash of spears. Now, this way of warfare was to be a way to make a decisive decision in a short space of time. This has been a constant thing in the Western way of war. To make the conflict as short as possible, to use extreme violence to make that war as short as possible, the ruthless application of technology, and to annihilate your enemy. Now, the hoplite at first didn't do this. His job was simply to push his opponent off the field, and once one side had won psychologically, they would raise their spear up, showing a sign of surrender, and they would retire from the field. Now, the first truly modern army was the Roman army. The Roman army was modern because it was an army made up of soldiers who had specialised skills other than soldiering, other than being killers. Other than being killers and being able to march, they were also able to build things. They had a skill, and their organisation on a section system of 8 and then in 10s to make up a cohort, and then from that system onwards to make up a legion with a combined arms, is something that has been taken on by all Western armies. It's not just that the direct application of technology has changed things unrecognisably. Today, the modern British soldier is supposed to be a soldier who has command and control. This was something that the Germans in the Second World War and the Israelis in recent times developed, and the British have also taken it on board, where every soldier can become a leader. If his leader is killed, he assumes control, and so therefore he has a skill other than just being a rifleman. He can also build things. He is a multi-task, multi-skilled operative in that sense. And now we're asking soldiers to go even beyond that. With the advent of digital technology, we are creating scientist soldiers. These are soldiers who can test the air for chemical and biological weapons, to find out why a building collapsed because terrorists blew it up with a charge, and what kind of charge they use, whether they'd use that charge again. These are all important questions for a commander to know. And also, like the Swedish army, our army is becoming more and more integrated into a digital web, where every soldier has an internet which he can link into, and his actions and his are being filmed and analysed by other soldiers who are not at the front line. Now, what is the basis of the Western soldier? Well, getting back to the Romans or the Anglo-Saxons, for instance, they would train. These are soldiers who trained. They weren't just people who were brought up and given arms and armour and sent out into the field. These were people who did 3 or 5 mile runs a day. And now the modern English soldier does perhaps 7 miles a day, 7 mile run a day. The Americans probably 5, the Germans the same as the English. It's making that athlete, hunter, soldier, which is what the airborne and the Waffen SS and the Israelis focused on when they were building their armies. You know, the Royal Marines now are that kind of soldier. Now we can't get away from that. The physical ability to physically go and destroy the enemy in hand-to-hand combat, but hand-to-hand combat, like Pancratian or Jiu-Jitsu, Pancratian being the original martial art, perhaps was the origin for boxing and the Eastern martial arts, perhaps Western martial arts from the Greek Olympics went east rather than martial arts coming from the west and was taught. You can see all the moves from Jiu-Jitsu in that, but that is not as important as the ability for a rifleman to be a bus for his gun, to take that rifle to the position it's needed, to deliver the firepower on the target when it's needed, to be able to do the 25-mile march in 5 hours, to be able to march further. Now, because of the Romans being modern army, all modern armies have taken on from them, even in the East. Now, what has the Eastern way of war done to combat the Western way of war? Well, it is in delaying tactics, it is in attrition, it is that they wish to be able to go on further than they think that we can go on further. This is the basis, the idea of terrorism. Whereas the Western soldier might be able to fight for 5 years, they think nothing of fighting for 10 years. Whereas we might march 25 miles in a day, the Chinese are trained to march 50. It's all to overcome our technological superiority. Once you, however, have attained the ability to fight in a war of attrition, as our troops are finding that they can do and have been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they have the technological superiority, and they have the Western way of war on their side, then they are practically unbeatable. And you will find that the Western armies, being battle hardened now, will probably be able to continue to fight on in Afghanistan, and the only limit will be to the Western economies. You cannot have a strong army without a strong economy, and you must make a balance between the two. If all your money is going into non-productive infrastructure, being that military non-productive infrastructure, then you're going to have problems. The way the Romans did it was to use the army to build that infrastructure within their own countries, to make colonies. Now, I'm not saying that now, that we should do that now, but there are moves in Afghanistan to build up the infrastructure using Army Corps engineers, and I think that is a step in the right direction. It's to show them that the army is building as well as taking on the Taliban, and when it may come to it, that we have to invade Pakistan, you will see that infrastructure being laid over Pakistan to a direct opening up of the Central Asia, which hasn't happened since the Mongol Silk Roads, and that was the last time the Eastern way of war triumphed over the Western way of war. Perhaps we shall see, as with the Norman Conquest, the reverse of that with the Norman D-Day landings, and today we'll see the opening up of Central Asia through the use of military force.